Disability studies events, we got started a little bit late for accessibility, but welcome, and we're going to hear Dr. Beth Haller talk about her new book. I met Beth when in 2001 she was a commentator for my first disability studies paper at the Society for Disability Studies. And she has been really influential in helping the UTA Disability Studies minor and going to, she's been going to help the Texas Disability History Collection, was a host here by the library, and she got her PhD from Temple University, and she's now a professor emeritus from Towson University, but she's taught at City University of New York, York University in Canada, and UTA, and among other schools.
Towson.
Yes, and Towson. And she developed some of the first disability and media courses in North America. So her CV is too long to properly characterize, but she was a Phil White specialist in Australia. She has published 3 books. She is a co-editor of the Rutledge
companion.
Yes. Rutledge Companion on Disability and Media, and she's won a lot of awards. So, Beth Haller, please speak. Yeah.
Appreciate it. So is my PowerPoint good?
Yeah, we're getting a cable.
Okay.
We're going to connect into the wall.
Okay, we're getting me connected to the wall where all the power resides. Sign language interpreters let me know if I talk too fast. Sometimes I get on a roll.
Didn't want to do it.
Sorry for the delay. Hello to you out on the internet. Kel in Sweden, I see you.
There we go. I'm sorry. Can we get a chair? Yeah, just right here. Sorry.
I think I'm further back.
Both titles. We have card.
Okay, cool. I just don't want to pull the stuff out. Can you still see me? Am I moving too far away? Okay, I'm ready. Can everyone hear me? I'm Beth Haller. Another question? We have cart.
Can I escape?
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, trapped here forever. Okay, cart's ready?
Yeah. What what we want is, okay. Like, he's checking it.
Okay.
Not us.
While we're waiting, I will tell you that I brought a hard copy of my book for the library to put into the collection here at UTA.
And we don't need the PowerPoint subtitles.
That's where she's at right now.
What do you mean?
Okay. There.
Morgan set this up. There she is, right there.
Okay.
So I think, yeah, that'd be fine.
Everybody ready? Oh, can you turn more light on? They can't see the interpreter. Turn a little bit more light on. Is there a way to put a little bit more light here?
Maybe turn them all on.
That's fine. I think you'll be able to see the PowerPoint if the lights are all on.
Oh, sure.
Nice.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
Is it a go? Morgan, I'm presenting this book, hard copy for the collection here at UTA.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Haller, as Sarah said. So I'm going to talk about 2 chapters of my book because I like the fact that these are real people with disabilities in the shows and they have a little bit of say over what they're doing. And entertainment TV has some issues, as does Hollywood films, but television is doing a better job. So the first kind of little thing I have up here is about why I did the book in the first place. So my book's name is Disabled People Transforming Media Culture for a More Inclusive World. And it tells the stories of disabled people who are creating media. And it's not just in America, all around. I talked to people in Germany and Africa. So, and these are people that are influential in creating modern mass media, but they're mostly unknown. And so, but I see them as kind of really putting a highlight on the changing representations and the society's understanding of disability. So the picture on here is me with a young woman with Down syndrome who has bright red hair and a blue top. I have a blue and black Argyle on me, on my sweater and black pants, and we're both smiling. So this was taken in January of 2020, before we knew all our lives were going to change. And so I was in Southern California. I interviewed Rachel Osterbach, who is on Born This Way. She's a young woman with Down syndrome. And so I'll talk more about her later, but I just found this picture. I have a picture of her adorable dog, too. So some of the topics covered in my book: disabled performers collaborating on set, disabled TV writers and comedians, documentaries from disabled people on reality TV, people with non-apparent disabilities creating media, disabled people who create TED Talks and podcasts, web series and streaming content from disabled creators, graphic novels and graphic memoirs by disabled people. But today I'm talking about reality TV. So there's a lot more disabled people on reality TV these days. So these are just a couple examples. Amy Purdy is far left. She's a Paralympian and double leg amputee who was on Dancing with the Stars in 2018. Survivor 42 had Drea Wheeler, who became the show's first legally blind contestant in 2022. I've had a good number of finds while I was preparing this presentation, so I'd never heard about her before because it's so recent. And then Little Couple on TLC from 2009 to 2021. I'll talk about it a little bit too. So why am I focusing on reality TV? Because I'm actually a mass media scholar, so there's something in the mass media world that's called parasocial interactions and parasocial relationships. And I felt like that was happening. Even though my book is not about media audiences, it's about disabled media creators, I still think I can say that disabled people on TV and in film do have an impact in the audience's kind of knowledge about disability and also their feelings of closeness. So I'll talk a little bit about how this kind of plays out. But parasocial interactions and parasocial relationships are when TV audiences develop a feeling that they, quote, know the performers on TV. So this is a theory that was developed in the 50s. In the early 2000s, researchers developed it further to show that these parasocial relationships from television help people get over prejudice and against certain marginalized groups. So Schiappa, Gregg, and Hughes actually did their research based on Will and Grace, and a show about two gay men and their female friends. And so that research, I don't know if you guys remember, it was not that long ago, but anyway, when Joe Biden was vice president, he said something like, yeah, I have no problem with gay people. I watch Will and Grace. Like he had felt more familiar with the gay community from watching a sitcom. So that's kind of where I'm coming from here, that people are watching these reality shows and other entertainment TV, and they're identifying with people with disabilities. They're feeling more closeness, and they're understanding some of the prejudice that disabled people face. One of the research studies I wanted to highlight, there's a picture of Tori and Zach Roloff and their 3 kids from Little People, Big World. I'll talk about them too. Tori is average height, Zach has dwarfism, all 3 of their children have dwarfism, which I'll talk about too. Okay, this is a study that was of news, but I still think it's relevant to the research about media creators and media performers. So research into parasocial interactions from TV and online audience shows that viewing actual disabled people on television can lessen their negative stereotypes about disability. So my coworker Lingling Zhang and I did a study of Speechless, which had a wheelchair user who was the main character, and he also presented as somebody with a speech disability, but he doesn't actually have one in real life. But we wanted to see how the audience, and so she ran an experiment, I did all the literature review of what people, college students, when we say people, we mean college students in research, if they started feeling more of an affinity with the character with a disability when it was actually a real person with a disability. It wasn't super, it was a small study, but still, it starts showing us that people are starting to identify and understand what people with disabilities go through in these media contexts. So from a media creation standpoint, disabled people can better craft their own representation in TED Talks or on reality TV, one of my chapters. And disabled audience members and disabled participants in these genres may feel empowered by the content, which I'll also talk about. So this is a related study that I cite in my book. So this is Demi Lovato, and she says, quote, it's like a meme quote, my father had schizophrenia and bipolar disorder as well, and I watched him live a very unfortunate life because of the lack of access to treatment. The stigma needs to be taken away from mental illness. So Demi Lovato disclosed that she had bipolar disorder in 2011. So these researchers, excuse me, did research on how the audiences understood and felt good about what they learned from seeing her on TV So they watched a TV interview with her talking about the disclosure of her bipolar, and then they had a magazine article that they read. And their findings were, quote, the audience's social distance and negative stereotypes toward people with bipolar disorder reduced significantly following exposure to Demi Lovato's disclosure about the disease, end quote. And that one sentence, I think, is why I study media. It's very powerful. People may not have ever had anyone disclose their mental illness to them, but in celebrities, being much more open about their mental illnesses or non-apparent illnesses or even physical disabilities, people are getting information. There's always been this understanding that people are taking information from their entertainment on television. The next reason I'm looking at reality TV is because of its history of including people with chronic illnesses and disabilities. So y'all are young, but back in the olden days of reality TV, this is Pedro and, excuse me. So he was one of the first participants in The Real World. So Jonathan Murray, the person who developed the modern American reality show, The Real World on MTV in 1992, said he developed this kind of reality TV because he wanted to put people from diverse backgrounds together and see what happens. The friendships, the inevitable conflicts that arise. And so Jonathan Murray, which I'll talk more about him in a second, is a gay man, and he says that the reason he got this idea when he was a TV producer, he grew up, I think, in upstate New York, and then went to Columbia, Missouri for journalism school, and suddenly he's thrown in with people from all over the country, all over the world, and he finds it fascinating. He's like roommates with people that have totally different backgrounds from him. And so that kind of planted a seed that this could be really interesting. And then I'll talk about his producing partner in a minute. But anyway, so he developed The Real World on MTV. They actually wanted him to do a scripted show. So he was combining with somebody who was specialized in soap opera production. But they didn't like it. So then they just kind of said, well, what if we just do it with real people instead of actors portraying characters? So it was a hit. Apparently, all the world didn't know this is what they needed. And also he knew that conflicts would arrive. When people have different backgrounds, there's going to be conflicts. I don't think he realized what kind of horrific conflicts would happen, but, I think in disability circumstances, some of the reality shows are actually what I said in the title. They're more real than reality TV because disabled people want to tell their truth if they're on TV, mostly, unless they're an actor. Then they want to tell the character's truth. So anyway, this is Pedro Zamora. So he was one of the first cast members on The Real World to show the power of reality TV to educate audiences about chronic illnesses and disabilities. He was the first openly gay, HIV-positive person on American television when he appeared on the third season of The Real World. So Pedro, super interesting guy. He actually died the same year that he was on there because they didn't have a cure for AIDS yet. He's a Cuban immigrant. He got AIDS sometime between the ages of 13 and 17. He was very upset his mother had died, and he realized he was gay, and he was in Miami at this point. And so in 2017, he went to give blood and found out, when he was 17, he went to give blood and found out he had HIV, which they didn't call it then, but anyway, and so here was somebody with active AIDS on the show, and that's what he became after he was 17. He said, I'm going to educate people. I didn't know what the risk he was putting himself in, and people didn't want to talk about it because it was sexually transmitted disease, and so he was there. And Jonathan Murray said, yes, we are putting someone with AIDS on this show in 1994. I mean, this was, still pretty scary time. We didn't have it. It wasn't become a chronic illness yet. AIDS wasn't. Okay, so this is Jonathan Murray. So he also is the person that created Born This Way, which I'm going to talk about a long time. So he said the idea to focus on people with intellectual disabilities and Born This Way came from a documentary series that he saw that was from European television. So this guy who was the brother of a woman with Down syndrome, created kind of a documentary series about his sister. And so Murray saw that and he's like, yeah, why don't we put people with disabilities in our reality shows? And then he talked to his business partner, the late Mary Alice Bunham, and so that's what they thought. They could do the same kind of thing with a group of disabled people, and then they saw, no, that was not going to work. So they were going to try to do kind of a big brother thing and have all these disabled people, or all the people with Down syndrome live together in a house. And they're like, it's boring, and he knew the families, so he decided, he had several years, because A&E did not want his first iteration of Born This Way. They didn't think it was interesting. So he thought about it for actually several years, and then thought about, why don't we just show people with Down syndrome on their journey toward independence? He thought that would be more interesting, and then they could also include family members who are supporting them and encouraging them on the path. So I think his background really, and also just his background of having Pedro Zamora in one of his first reality shows, he understood that he is not going to exploit people with disabilities or chronic illnesses. So he wanted to make it something that was empowering and showing that journey. So one of my friends who loves Born This Way says, it's so real, it's so real. And it really is. I mean, they just let people's personalities come out and their interactions. They're going to their jobs, they're going, to leisure stuff. I personally think that the reality show Born This Way helped change attitudes about Down syndrome. So it's 7 people with Down syndrome: John, who's African American; Megan, Christina, whose parents are from Spain; Sean, Rachel, I'm blanking on his name, Elena. So people really got, I think, good information from Born This Way, and it was entertaining too. So it was on from 2015 to 2019. The focus of the show was on what adults with Down syndrome can do, not what they can't do. They did focus groups with viewers who had Down syndrome, and they reported that these seemed like their friends. They weren't being fake. There was some criticism focused on the high-level communication skills of the cast. Some viewers wanted to see nonverbal cast members added. Another criticism was that people with Down syndrome featured are quite independent and talented, whereas in real life, some people with Down syndrome may need a caregiver or other support throughout their lives. As the series went on, they added like a child with Down syndrome, who I don't think was very verbal. He was adorable. So they were going out into the community, talking to parents, talking to kids with Down syndrome. So there were other people coming into the mix. And some of them had, I believe, other disabilities too. I think there was an episode, I think it was Sean. I know it was Sean, but I think he got a cochlear implant in one of the episodes because he was hard of hearing. So Born This Way sparked new conversations. This is a quote from Sean's mother, and that is Elena and Megan hugging. Parents, quote, parents of children both with and without Down syndrome are watching the show together and having important discussions about acceptance, abortion, and making friends with people who are different than themselves, cast member Sean's mother said. So why did I want to include this? Well, I just thought it was a great show too. But a lot of times I went to Southern California in January, back in the pre-pandemic times. And because where I taught at Towson University, we would have a month for a mini semester that I never taught in. So I basically had 6 weeks off at Christmas time. And a friend that teaches at Chapman University there, which actually Megan went to look at for going to film school there, would have me speak to his classes in person and have other events that we would do together. He does disability studies. His name is Art Blazer. He's a political science professor. So I said, see if I can interview. I knew Gail Williamson, who is the agent for people with disabilities in Hollywood. So I interviewed her for the book, and she gave me the contact information for Rachel. So Rachel, Sean, and John, I think it was just Rachel and John, were the first people with Down syndrome ever to present an Emmy Award. And I'll get on to Born This Way's Emmys too. So it's really surprising what Rachel told me. And her mother was there too to fill in some backstory. So before she was on Born This Way, she was working as a clerk at an insurance company, like doing the mail or something. And so a few years before, she got approved to move out into her own apartment with support. And Rachel did not feel ready. So, you know, they had a place for her to go live independently, but she's a very shy, kind of quiet person. She didn't feel ready to be independent yet. So her parents were like, that's fine. So then she goes onto this reality show, and it changes her life. You know, she feels more empowered, she feels more confident. She said she was unsure of how the world would embrace her because of her Down syndrome, but she said rooming with fellow cast member Megan Baumgars and watching cast member Christina Sands get engaged and then married on Born This Way helped her feel more empowered to move out of her parents' home in Southern California and into her own apartment with support. Rachel continues the clerical job at an insurance firm she had before, but now she loves public speaking. So then, you know, like I talked to her in January of 2020. She was literally about to move out into her own apartment in a couple of weeks. The pandemic happens. She moves back home. So then I talked to her dad, whose email I have, checking up on how she's doing after a couple of years. It took me 3 years or 4 years to write this book. So he said, oh, she's doing great. She's back in her apartment with her support. And what really happened, it was one of those pandemic pluses. So I think her support person is somebody who can work their other job from home. So she's more like a roommate with support parts of her life as a roommate. So it's kind of like a win-win. Her parents have now retired and moved a couple of hours away to somewhere near Palm Springs, I think. Anyway, but they see her every weekend. But I just thought that was so interesting that she saw that people could cope with the fact that she had Down syndrome. In one of, I think it's a pilot episode, I think it's Elena who doesn't even want to hear the word Down syndrome. She like covers her ears and stuff. And she has a pretty rough background. Her mother was from Japan and even admits on the show that she kind of rejected her daughter for the first 10 years of her life. And her father's, I think, a white Australian. So there was some tense stuff going on, but it was stuff people needed to see, you know, because it's true. A lot of people have a hard time, not just in Japan, you know, accepting that their child has this lifelong disability. So, you know, that was nice to see the growth of her mother and her, Elena, get more confidence too. And they even came up with a viewing guide for educators. So they actually wanted it to be shown in schools. You know, a lot more kids with Down syndrome are mainstream. Inclusive education is a, you know, luckily more important these days. Here's what the viewing guide says. To the educator, quote, Born This Way, the Emmy Award-winning series on A&E would be a great fit for a range of classes, including social studies, media, current events. It would be useful to show and discuss during after-school programs and events. The series offers an excellent opportunity for students and general audiences to discuss and explore the lives of those with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. Born This Way is appropriate for upper middle school, high school, and college students. And the other thing is the far reach of a series like this. So before I retired, I did one last sabbatical, if I could get my sabbatical in. And so in 2018, I flew to Australia. I'm just looking through you can get a direct flight from DFW, 17 hours direct. So you want to watch a lot of TV. So I'm flipping through the stuff that I can watch on the seat TV. There is Born This Way. I was like, yes, this is the power of media, to live on and educate somebody that's just in a seat flying on a plane, you know. So I thought that was, you know, the fact that media lives on in reruns and other streaming platforms is awesome. I think Born This Way, you can get it on the A&E network, but I think you have to do streaming on A&E. Born This Way audiences, I believe, got to see fulfilling lives of adults with Down syndrome when they live in a supportive community. It won 3 Emmys out of 17 nominations. Outstanding unstructured reality program, outstanding casting for a reality program, outstanding cinematography for a reality program. And then it won a special, it's not really special, they give it every year since the early 2000s. It won the Television Academy Honor for 2016, which, quote, celebrates and recognizes television with a conscience, television programming that inspires, informs, motivates, and even has the power to change lives, end quote. So that's my Born This Way right now. I'll come back to it in a second. Little People, Big World is kind of the big reality show with people who are physically different to kick off all the reality shows, especially with people with dwarfism. So it started in 2006, chronicles the life of the Roloff family in Oregon, parents Amy and Matt, who both have dwarfism, their 4 children, Zach, who also has dwarfism, and his average height twin, Jeremy, younger sister, Molly, and younger brother, Jacob, who are also of average height. It was a successful TV program right out of the gate. TLC said, this is awesome. I think that's why they greenlit so many other reality programs with people with dwarfism. So it got really good ratings, gathering 16 million cumulative viewers in its first 3 weeks of airing, which opened the door to many more reality shows about disabled people. Zach, he was a teenager, like I think he was 14 when they started, 2006, is now the adult star. So he's married to Tori, and there are 3 children who all have dwarfism. Both parents have new partners who are both average height. And so those 3 couples, Zach and his wife, Matt and his girlfriend, Amy and her husband, and then Zach's 3 little kids, are the current show. Then, in researching for this presentation, Zach and Tori are leaving Little People Big World, which I think will finally kill the program. Because everybody wants to see those adorable children. But I think what I wrote about in my book, I have a quote from Zach that I'm about to talk about. They got so much online hate for producing these adorable children. It's just like, ugh. So I really think this, Tori and Zach have a podcast. They say that Jackson, the oldest, who's now like 6 or so, is already saying he doesn't like the camera in his face and stuff. But this criticism, this hate that they got for producing their beautiful family, in my opinion, that's why they're saying no more of this. And also the kids are growing up and don't want to be part of it probably. So these average height viewers criticized Zach and Tori for bringing 2 children with dwarfism into the world. This is actually very rare that if one of the parents have dwarfism, they have like a 10% chance or less. But as Zach says, he has a superpower. He can produce children who have dwarfism. And they do all the tests so they can prepare, so they know whether the child, the doctors can see what size the child is and that kind of thing to see if the baby has dwarfism. And then this Reddit discussion, it scarred me to have to read it. People were actually suggesting that the couple do IVF so they could get an average height kid. I'm like, a bunch of people who'd had IVS jumped into that Reddit discussion and started screaming at those people. It's very expensive, it doesn't work all the time, and it's, they just had expressed that, like people with 3 boys want their girl, so they were just like, yeah, we're fine either way, but it'd be nice to have an average height kid too. So that's why they're saying, do IVF. So anyway, all this hate they got, which they knew about. So the episode that they talked about it was in 2022, November 29th. And so he spoke out about what these jerks online should not be doing. He said, quote, "They think it is not good that we procreated and brought more dwarfs into the world to, quote, suffer," Zach says, "but I totally disagree with that. I think people with disabilities have a right to procreate and have a family," end quote. That particular episode was when their friends were visiting, I think from Indiana. Anyway, a guy named Mikey Wittes, who also has dwarfism, and his wife, who also has dwarfism. I'm going to get to them in the next quote. And they have a little boy. So the father's name is Mikey, and the little boy's name is Mike. Anyway, and then this was like the saddest episode ever. Sorry to bring you down. But anyway, Mikey and his wife had 2 what are called double dominant babies but they have the double gene for dwarfism, and these babies do not survive. Their one daughter survived for a week, their other daughter survived for a month, and they talk so openly about how much they love these daughters, and they think it's important that people talk about their grieving. It's getting me emotional thinking about it. And I think that's what spurred Zach and Tori to say, look, our friends had to bury their children with dwarfism, so we're going to be very happy that we have children that are surviving and thriving because they have a father with dwarfism who's going to raise them to know about dwarfism, in their lives. Okay, so this is what Mikey said to Zach when they took both families to the beach. They're in Oregon, the Oregon beach, and the little boys were playing together because they're similar ages, Mike and Jackson. So this is Jackson Roloff playing soccer, which is the big game in the Roloff family. Anyway, so they were just talking about, whether Jackson and Mike, the 2 little boys that were like 4 and 5, understood that they had dwarfism yet. And Zach was saying, not really, he doesn't understand yet that he looks different because he's still, in kindergarten or 1st grade or whatever. And so they were talking about how to have that conversation. And so Mikey actually grew up with average height parents. And, so he was raised by people without dwarfism, but he's married to somebody with dwarfism and he has a son with dwarfism. So here's his quote. "Find a way to give them the experience of doing the things that they want and they seek enjoyment in. Don't shelter them from society. Let them be in society. Let them know what society is like and how it will treat them so that they are ready for it when they become an adult on their own," end quote. So I think it shows another kind of education and parasocial relationships. So, lots of average height parents have children with dwarfism. It's not that every person with dwarfism is going to have a child with dwarfism, but a lot more average height, because it's just a random, genetic thing. And there's 200 kinds of dwarfism, I think. Anyway, so, I think that kind of information is just really important for parents. Like, people watch a lot of TV. So, somebody's cousin's neighbor could have seen that and said, oh yeah, my neighbor's grandkid has dwarfism. Okay, go watch this, and you get a little bit more understanding of what the life of an adult with dwarfism is and the life of a child with dwarfism. And then it led to another show, which is actually one of my favorite shows, Little People, Big World. So this is Dr. Jen Arnold. She's an MD neonatologist. Bill Klein, he's a businessman. Will Klein, who they adopted from China. Zoe Klein, who they adopted from India. So Little People, Big World kind of led Jennifer Arnold to say yes to being on a reality show. She and Bill allowed them to do like a reality show special where they got married, like little couple marries on the beach or whatever. She was like, I'm a doctor, I don't have time for this. But she's in a store, and they had wrote a memoir in 2015, and so Bill talks about what changed her mind. Quote, at the moment Jen heard the little girl recognize her, she realized Little People, Big World had been doing a great job of breaking down barriers and educating people about vernacular and proper etiquette related to people with skeletal dysplasia. The child had an understanding of Jen's condition as well as respect for Jen because of the child's exposure to skeletal dysplasia on the show, end quote. So Dr. Jen Arnold's like, oh, we're going to be educating people? Because a lot of what she does now in neonatology is like educating other doctors about how to work on tiny, tiny babies. And she educates firefighters and ambulance crew. I mean, when you have a really tiny baby, you have to know special stuff. So this was on till 2021, but kind of in a broken way. And the other reason, also in researching this, the other reason it's better to watch reality TV than just find stuff online. So I'm watching this because Will is now 13, so he just made headlines a couple of weeks ago for putting up a TikTok dance video to a rap song with lots of cursing in it. So she went online to apologize for it. She does videos to talk about their lives now that they don't have a show. Anyway, and so I'm watching this stuff about the little couple, what they're doing now. So this British, some of it's probably AI too, this British thing I was watching on YouTube tried to say that Zoe did not have dwarfism. So I was just like, and then they show a picture of her getting surgeries that she needed for dwarfism. So, now we have so much misinformation out there online that I literally send people to reality shows because at least people involved, because Matt and Amy Roloff became producers of the show within the first season. So they're proving what, and you can tell the difference. If you watch the first couple of seasons, suddenly it all wears off about the shots of Amy climbing into her car, that has a step on it, or climbing the shelves in a grocery store to get something she needs. She's athletic, so she didn't bother her. But anyway, I kind of focus on their bodies, kind of melted away because the kids had interesting stuff happening. Matt was always like a character you love to hate. So then, Little People, Big World results in push girdles. So, it's all in the family there in Hollywood. Everybody, when they see a successful reality show, they're like, why not do another one if that one was successful? So a woman named Gay Rosenthal, a producer who created Little People, Big World, after, she got it started, she knew Angela Rockwood, who is an Asian American actor, model, who became a quadriplegic in 2001. Like, I don't know, a few months after she had gotten in her first movie. It was unscripted, an uncredited role, but still, she was in the first Fast and Furious from 2001, so before the car accident. So Rosenthal approaches Rockwood and says, we should do a reality show about your life. And she says, no, we should do a reality show about me and my girlfriend's lives, because she had this little set of friends who were also wheelchair users. So Rosenthal signed on as executive producer. Rockwood became the show's producer. So Push Girls was on Sundance Channel from 2012 to 13. And I think the only reason I think a lot of these shows didn't do the kind of Little People, Big World long-term thing is because streaming was coming in, and the Hollywood types, the people that run TV networks and film studios, are in big denial about putting their stuff online because they want to force people to watch the TV machine. So they cancel things, like they cancel Speechless way too soon. They don't understand if you get even more seasons, that's more you can sell to Netflix, So anyway, and Push Girls also had this kind of education. So this is Mia and this is Tiffany, a couple of their quotes from a disability publication. So the women on Push Girls said they hoped the show would show viewers that wheelchair users live similar lives to them. Mia said, quote, "This is a perfect platform to be able to break those Hollywood stereotypes. It's about us, it's about reality, about our real lives, and that's how people are going to connect with us most naturally," end quote. And one thing that I remember from Push Girls, her mother was like a nightmare. Like, she did not believe that Mia just couldn't get up and walk. When she was like 15, she had an aneurysm in her spine. It burst. So one day she was a swimmer on her high school swim team. The next day she couldn't walk because of this aneurysm. Her mother would not, she just thought she wasn't trying hard enough. I mean, like, that is a nightmare made for reality TV. I will never forget when her mother was acting that way. Tiffany, disabled in a car wreck. Her quote is, "The show is totally about opening people's eyes and letting them see that we live life just like they do, only we do it sitting, which is a different perspective," end quote. People commented that, oh, they're all too beautiful. Well, they were already friends in LA. So you're doing a reality show about existing group of friends. And it was on 2 seasons, and there was lots and lots of disability studies. I can send you to lots of research about Push Girls. I personally thought it was great, but a lot of people don't watch TV in academia, so they didn't know what was happening. They'd never seen a reality show. They're like, why are they talking like this to the camera? I said, this is the reality format. If you want to have a reality show, it has to fit the reality show format. So that's why I think it's important that you guys out there, students and everybody, start doing papers about mass media, because it really has a huge impact. And a lot of people in academia aren't studying disability in media. So it's a great area. Join me. There's about 5 of us in the world. Okay, so the next group is from another chapter I did about people with non-apparent disabilities. So after I'm done, I'll talk about why I'm barefoot and my non-apparent disabilities. So it became clear to me, I can't remember which podcast I was listening to, that hidden disabilities has fallen out of favor and invisible disabilities has really fallen out of favor. I was calling them non-visible disabilities in the book, but I like non-apparent, and I think they're doing a good job. And this comes from the World Institute on Disability. So some people even consider hidden disabilities, the terms hidden disabilities and invisible disabilities, ableist. Here's what WID said. in an article on their website. Quote, the word disability might call to mind an image of someone who uses a wheelchair, crutch, or other mobility devices. Why? Because these mobility devices are visual indicators that a person is disabled. But many disabilities are not visually discernible. In fact, the majority of disabilities are non-apparent, end quote. So that's why I wanted to have a chapter about people who have non-apparent disabilities, but they're making media and they're talking about it. I'm not talking about it, excuse me, today, but one of the things in that chapter, chapter 7, was the TV show, the musical comedy drama TV show, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, because the actor, singer, creator of that show, Rachel Bloom, is somebody with anxiety, depression, since she was like in middle school, and she's been very open about it. She didn't have the disability of the character, and the Crazy Ex-Girlfriend title is ironic. You know, people get called crazy when they don't have a mental illness and when they do, and it shouldn't be used either way. Anyway, so we people like that have a public platform, and then they gave the main character a disability. I'm forgetting what the disability, the mental illness was. But anyway, I'm not talking about that show today, but I'm talking about a show called Born for Business, which was on Peacock streaming. And two of the people on Born for Business had non-apparent disabilities. So disability studies scholar Susan G. Cummings, I looked at some of her work, which was on people with non-apparent disabilities in online spaces. And she says, giving and receiving information online about their non-apparent disabilities empowers both creators and audiences. They are opening up their lives and experiences in online spaces that build resilience. Pictured as one of the online campaigns she studied, Suffering the Silence. I want to point out the difference. So it's a picture of 5 people with their hand covering their mouth. One says chronic Lyme disease, one says Crohn's, one says diabetes, one says lupus, one says asthma. She looked at several others, but I just thought this was a nice way to illustrate people with non-apparent disabilities, because you wouldn't know unless they had it written on their arm. The other thing that was super interesting about Born for Business, I highly recommend watching it, like I said, Peacock streaming, is they were filming and then the pandemic happened. And they decided when they got done with lockdown, they were going to continue, and that was going to be part of the series. So we get to see how this impacted disabled business people, because they had to shut down these businesses that they were just getting going well. So Born for Business is a reality show on NBC's Peacock streaming network. Season 1 ran in 2021, and because the series was shooting in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, it is also a glimpse into how disabled business owners coped with the pandemic shutdowns. The disabled entrepreneurs are Kiana Allen of Chicago. She's an African-American woman who has lupus and runs a fashion business for plus-size women with a retail store and online shopping site. Colette DeVito of Boston, who has Down syndrome and owns a bakery. Second one with the cookies in front of her. Chris Trebes of Chicago and Indiana, who has spinal muscular atrophy and owns music venues and plans concerts. And Lexi Zhang He of Long Island, New York, who has an anxiety disorder and has an online shopping brand. So they all had businesses were impacted, especially Chris. Like he has events venues and organizes concerts, and now no one is allowed to be together. But back before, when they were casting, he said that he wanted to be on the show, quote, due to the lack of representation of people with disabilities who, quote, who have a disproportionately low voice in media, especially when it comes to portraying stories of proactive business owners making their own opportunities and succeeding. He laments the often repeated tropes of pitied people with disabilities who are painted as helpless and unresourceful, end quote. So it's a picture of him when they did their first like talk back where they had them all together. And Lexi, that's a tiny part of her leg there. So that's Kiana and Chris. But they all had really interesting things. It was almost like, not like group therapy, but just that they were all in the show together, but they didn't get together because they were all over the US. So Lexi talked about how her anxiety was lessened when she could be in the room with her castmates and, just hear and see that they're going through similar things that she is. And then Kiana and Chris ended up partnering when they came back to shoot during the pandemic. So he created, once we knew that masking and distancing would work, so he used one of his events venue for her to watch a live streamed fashion show. So, like people were being creative, and that's something that she was already online. So she actually was less hurt than a lot of others because she was already selling a lot of her clothing online. But she was the other one that I focused on a lot because she has lupus and she really didn't care to be on the show, but she saw the importance of its kind of platform. So she says she has never wanted to reveal her personal life or background to the public, but saw Born for Business as an important platform. She wants to highlight the beauty and talents of plus-size women and women with disabilities in reality shows. She says the world needs to change the negative ways they view plus-size women and people with disabilities. One of her quotes from the show was, "In order for people to start loving themselves more, they have to see more people that look like them in media," end quote. And her website, before she was even on the show, was one of the top fashion websites for plus size women. So she was kind of killing it as a business owner even before the show. So these are her two sons. And she also opened a brick and mortar cereal bar, and it looks really yummy. If you like cereal and candy. Cereal bar candy store in a neighborhood near where she lives in Chicago. So part of the pandemic time of the show was showing them getting the cookie candy store and cookie cereal bar. I can't get it all out. Anyway, it's very festive, all the different kinds of cereal. They made to-go stuff like tacos to go or whatever. Anyway, I think I just can't forget anything that happened in this particular storyline because she's trying to start a new business with her sons. And that was really clear for all the participants. It's not just about making money, it's about creating a legacy and showing people that, because Chris, the one with SMA that uses a wheelchair, he has a daughter and he's a single dad. Colette, the woman with Down syndrome, had just gotten a contract to provide her cookies in venues around Boston. So these entrepreneurs' stories are powerful as they watch the pandemic close everything. It's clear that their businesses are important legacies for them beyond income that they need for themselves and their families. An employee, Kiana, discusses the vulnerability she feels as the COVID-19 pandemic hits. Quote, "My immune system is compromised because of lupus. I feel like going outside in a bubble. I've never seen anything like this," end quote. I mean, you have somebody with a non-apparent disability really standing out in an alley telling, or sitting in her car telling the people on the show, what's going on with her life and this horrible thing that's happened. And then one last thing, because I don't want you to think everything's happy and go lucky. So we all know that reality TV has major problems. So I was highlighting a lot of other things that were very positive. But I think even the negatives in reality TV spur on the community. So this is Nal DeMarco, a proud graduate of the Maryland School for the Deaf in Gallaudet. So he just fell into modeling because he's super good looking. And so he was doing some modeling, and then he gets into America's Next Top Model. And it just stunned me. He has a whole chapter about what happened that day on America's Next Top Model. So he's a deaf model, actor, producer, who's now helped produce Deaf U, a Netflix reality show about Gallaudet students that premiered in 2020. The ableist day, I just call it the ableist day on the set of America's Next Top Model, was they had conveyed to him, this is what he believes was behind the scenes, that they didn't like he was so happy. You do those talkbacks, and he's like a very emotionally happy person, isn't quick to anger. He had a very lovely family of 3 generations of the deaf community, went to all deaf schools except for 1 year in Texas, actually. Anyway, so I think they plotted to get him upset. I mean, so he and I, reading his memoir, think this is what happened. So they get up at 5 to go to some off-site place to have this, they're supposed to do some kind of modeling thing for that day's America's Next Top Model. And he shows up, and they haven't hired an interpreter for that day. I mean, he doesn't speak. He only uses sign language. That's his language. He had some kind of cell phone. This was in 2000. It's not a cell phone. He said it was some kind of Chinese keyboard that he could type stuff to people, but a lot of times they would not type back to him. So it was a hellish day on set, and they had to get up at 5 in the morning to get to where they were. And that day, they were meeting disabled veterans. So they kind of like got him worked up into a frustrated, emotional tizzy. I don't say it's a tizzy, but that's my word. He was very upset. He had not been able to communicate for like the whole day with anyone. I mean, he says he can do really well with like hearing people that are putting together modeling stuff, because that's a lot of visual communication, and a lot of people that are taking pictures for models are using their hands anyway to tell you what they want. But they push him over to meet these disabled veterans. I think one was a double amputee, and he's still and they want him to talk to this guy who's there in a wheelchair. He's a double amputee. Well, he can't, he doesn't have an interpreter. And so he's like very emotional and almost crying when he's meeting the disabled veterans. So when you're watching the show, you don't know that Nal DeMarco has been denied his interpreter that whole day. You think he's getting emotional because he's meeting a disabled veteran. Well, he's like, why am I even meeting this disabled veteran? Because they're not deaf, they're not part of the deaf community. They can't communicate with me with sign language. He's happy to meet them. Thank you for your service. They liked meeting them, but the fact that they manipulated him into frustration so that he would have emotion on his face when he was meeting the disabled veteran is like the nightmare. And that's the other thing that Zach and Tori Roloff said about why and they just said this last week. They said they're leaving the show last week in the 25th season, is they didn't like what was going on behind the scenes and what the audiences, and now they have a podcast too. You can see them and they can talk about it directly to you. So I think they're not liking the way reality TV works. So why is all this important? Because we know how much entertainment media is in the lives of the audiences out there in all countries, not just America. And the research shows watching these can really foster positive attitudes to the disability community from TV and film viewers, may even help stop some discrimination against disabled people. And this report that you can get online was actually written by Judy Heumann, the mother of the disability rights movement in America. So she was a Ford Foundation scholar, and she looked at media, I think in 2018. And also, disabled people who are watching this can, learn about that. This is a friend of mine who's a disabled filmmaker. He's like, he wants kids to see that filmmaker is a potential career for them, or reality stars a potential career, like being a news anchor is a potential career. I talk in the book about a friend of mine in Nairobi, Kenya, who has albinism, and his background is journalism, and he's on a TV network there that is all sign language. It's called Signs TV. It's all sign language interpreted, because the creator of it has a sister who's deaf and couldn't get any of the networks to add sign language. So he's like, why is my sister not getting to interact with TV? So he starts his own TV network, Signs Media, and it has all sign language. And my friend Alan, who has albinism, albinism is not a good thing to have in Africa, because there's all these myths and wrong things, and people with albinism get killed. So he says, I want to be on screen. I want people to see me, see the color of my skin. And he actually started a group in Africa or in Kenya called Black Albinism, because people discriminate against the black community who doesn't have pigment in their skin, And a lot of people with albinism also have visual issues. Okay, next to the last one, I'm done. Disabled people working in media can also see Ali Stroker, who's been on TV. She won a Tony for a performance in Broadway's Oklahoma in 2019. And so a blogger with a disability says, quote, why we need performers with disabilities. Performers with a disability are much more likely to portray their characters in an accurate way and without any stereotypes. By having a disability themselves, these performers are able to showcase what people with that disability actually go through. It is also important for disabled people outside the entertainment industry to see representation of people who look like and act like them, end quote. So that does it for me. One last little quote. This is my friend Dom Evans, who's the disabled filmmaker I was talking about why representation matters. The disability community is filled with diversity. We need to make sure that that media representation of diversity reflects that. Things will not be truly equal until all of us are represented. If it's a person from Mexico who's deaf, if it's a wheelchair user who lives in the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma. Also the diversity within the disability community needs to be pictured as well. And Nal DeMarco got a little flack because Gallaudet, his Netflix show Deaf U, doesn't really have black women in it as the main characters. And even though Gallaudet sits in Washington, D.C., which is majority African American, I don't think Gallaudet is majority African American, not the faculty, not the students. So, we don't know if he's going to get a second season. Okay, here's my email. If you want to contact me, I have some of my cards. So let's hear your questions, comments.
Any
Haller,
questions?
I'm sorry, Dr. Haller, there's one in the chat.
Okay, cool.
From Mark Dellenbaugh. He says, if you are familiar with the British show The Last Leg, do you have any thoughts? Among other topics, it highlights Paralympic sports and uses the tagline weekly live topical comedy chat with 3 guys with 4 legs between them.
I think I've seen some part of it on YouTube, but I don't think it's something I can get in the US. But it sounds fantastic. As long as those 3 disabled guys are in charge, I say, let them do whatever they want, Yeah.
Yeah, my name's Morgan Brickey Jones, and I'm here with the library. And one show that I've seen all the seasons of, that just dropped a new season, Love on the Spectrum. I was wondering, because I have enjoyed, admittedly have enjoyed the show. And and you, I'm sure touch on it in your book.
I do.
About sometimes we see in media kind of, I've seen this word used, like infantilization.
Yeah.
Or like, like, is that show, and I think there's of course an Australia version and a US version,
Right.
and they're done a little bit differently. But like, do you see that as not even necessarily an issue with Love on the Spectrum? I've seen that, those two put together. But in any of these shows, like, do you think that plays a part sometimes too, of the
Oh, yeah.
treatment that disabled people have in reality TV specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think Born This Way was done much better than Love on the Spectrum. A disabilities studies student wrote her thesis about love on the spectrum in Australia, and another one called Employable Me, which I think we can watch the Canadian version. There's a Canadian, British, and Australian version of Employable Me, which is much more about helping people with especially intellectual and developmental disabilities figure out how to get work and jobs and stuff. But she talks about just what you're talking about, this kind of infantilization. I remember somebody that I knew at Towson who worked in, I think, occupational therapy. She watched the first season of the US and she's like, that lady that's talking to them is doing it. This is not how you talk to people on the spectrum. And because we have an adult center for adults with autism at Towson, so we're kind of like a hub of stuff for adults with autism, and there's only 2 in the United States. So they're so focused on kids, they forget. And I think that's why Love on the Spectrum is the way it is because, like, they think either they're funny or they can infantilize them. And I just feel like there should be more input from that community. I mean, one of them who's on there, has an animation company, Danny Bowen, I think, because I watch a few episodes of this season. So these are accomplished people, but I think they're kind of infantilized just because of what the show is about. Everybody's kind of like nervous if they're trying to find a partner or whatever, go on a date or something. So I think it kind of, that whole vibe. So yeah, I think they could do better if they had real consultants, that were really making sure that the show I really, really despised was a scripted show on Amazon Prime, As We See It, because I felt like it was really exploiting and erasing people on the spectrum. And it had 3 autistic actors as the main characters. They were fantastic, but it was made by, what was his name? The guy that did Parenthood, the TV show Parenthood. So he has a son with autism, and there was a character with autism on Parenthood. So he writes this show because he thinks people with autism are all like his son. Well, his son has threatened to sue him, and he just like laughs. But his son says, "You're using my life for these TV shows. Why am I not getting paid?" And he's like, "Ah." I'm like, this is the father creating these shows. Like, he should not be creating. And we made the character that's supposed to be his son like rude and obnoxious and saying all the wrong things. And I'm like, yeah, he's that way because he has this awful dad that's exploiting him for his whole life for these TV shows that make him millions. I mean, his son also goes to college, and so hope he gets a law degree. Does that lawsuit against his dad. So I think there's there's better consulting. The Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, ASAN, they should be involved, the National Down Syndrome Society was involved. But I think too many of these places go to Autism Speaks, which has some major issues because there's no autistic people involved. like the National Down Syndrome Society and the chapter in Los Angeles was very involved with, because they had like a recreation program that they let them use for, everybody getting together on Born This Way. So I just feel like you could tell that more care was taken, and also just, I think there needs to be a lot better education about what your life is going to be like. Like Rachel, she says she was chosen out of this acting group for people with Down syndrome that she was taking for like one night a week or something. And what she learned being in reality TV is that she didn't want to be an actor. She did not want to embody like negative emotions, but she loved public speaking. And so when the pandemic hit, she got on Cameo and was like doing Cameo, those videos that you can pay for. And she has a big fan base, so I think the Cameo went along until her parents moved out of the area, but she was doing Cameo videos for her fans for several, months or a year. And she did a bunch of speaking engagements in the run-up to the pandemic. People want her to talk at, a community college or disability event, something like that. She loves that. So she wasn't hurt. I don't think the people on Born This Way were hurt because their parents were involved too. And some people say, there's another one I would have everybody watch. It's called The Specials. It's from Britain and you can find it online. I think they put all the episodes online when the pandemic hit. Anyway, it's 4 or 5 people with intellectual disabilities living in this house in Brighton, England, and just living their lives. And they made a decision not to talk to any of the support staff or any of the family members, even though I think they do mention at the front end, the first episode, and it's a web series. I actually wrote their Wikipedia entry because it's so old. This was 2012. So they were like pioneers, and then it was all online, a web series, and then Oprah came calling. So they ran both seasons of the specials on the OWN network. So that was cool, but they ran all the episodes because they're like short episodes, not like 30 minutes long. Anyway, they ran them all at once on one day. I mean, the good news was they retained the rights to it, but still, I would have liked them to have a deal where they just like have reruns of it on the OWN network so more people could see it. But now that everybody streams, I think people can find it. Anyway, it's just called The Specials, there's a music group called The Specials. I think it has a dash between the and Specials. Other questions, comments? I'll tell you about why I'm in barefoot. So I have multiple chronic illnesses that are non-apparent. And then the big bad one is my feet. And I'm very happy you don't have carpet in here. So it's called erythromelalgia. And it's super, super rare. EM. Its nickname is EM. And so it's so rare that probably about 10,000 people in America have it. So I found out in October that the Mayo Clinic has a clinic for it. I think the only one in North or South America. So I went and met the expert a couple of weeks ago. So the treatment plan is hopefully that I will start a pain rehab because it's a very weird kind of thing. My feet turn bright red. They swell a little bit, but we're talking like bright red. You will notice. Sometimes it's in people's hands and face. They swell a little and then they get really painful, like your feet are on fire. And the reason that the expert at the Mayo Clinic is a dermatologist is I think because that's how he found these patients. People damage the skin on their feet, plunging them into ice, plunging them to cold water. I have to stand in cold water when I take a hot shower. My feet will be flared all night long or all day long. So It's unique. I've tried a lot of the treatments, so I'm waiting to hear, fingers crossed, to get into the Mayo Pain Management Rehab Program, which is 3 weeks in person back in Rochester, Minnesota. So if you know anybody that has this, have them contact me. I can give them more information.
Thank you so
Sure.
much, and thank you to the STAR Center for providing the interpreters and the cart, and to the Department of Management and Office of Access and Achievement for providing the cookies. Please take them, and thank you to the library for hosting us. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Let me go to the restroom real quick.
Wow, you don't get many bars in here. You don't get many bars in here.
Service is great. Oh, you're still mic'd up.
So it's not reality TV, but have you seen the show